Okay, I'll call to order regular special council meeting for the corporation Brunel, Lindbach and Ragland this 30th day of March, year 2022, approximately 7:02 p.m. I will do roll call. Councillor Banks.
Yes.
Councillor Young.
Here.
Councillor Kaufman.
Here.
Councillor Rutledge.
Here.
Okay, so all are present.
Yes.
Next item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. The resolution says that the council for the corporation of the township of Brunel, Lindbach and Ragland adopt the agenda as submitted. Any mover on that? Councillor.
I can move.
Councillor Kaufman, seconder on that? Councillor Banks, all in favor?
Yes.
It's here. Disclosure of pecuniary interest on any matters before us tonight with any councillors?
No.
No, there.
Okay, seeing none. So tonight's meeting, now to 4:1. There's a resolution that says that council for the corporation of the township of Brunel, Lindbach and Ragland accept this report as submitted and authorize the staff to enter into an agreement with Verizon Connect for the services of providing and installing GPS tracking units in the township. Township vehicles and PTO add-on for plow trucks for a period of 3 years for a total of $13,788. Plus HST using modernization funding. I need a mover on that. Councillor. Councillor Young, seconder.
Okay.
Councillor Rutledge. Any discussion starting with the mover?
What happens at the end of the 3 years? Can you renew it, or do you have to start over? Like, does the equipment carry on, or do they replace it? Or?
Your worship, after the 3 years, it's a 3-year contract. So after those 3 years, we can either renew, go a different route, limit it, whatever council chooses at that point in time.
The question I had, does it tell the speed that they're traveling at as well as the, where they
Your
are?
worship, yes, it tells you the speed, it tells you idling time, whether the plow's up, plow's down, whether you're sanding or not.
Thank you.
Councillor, any questions?
So this goes on all the vehicles?
I have it arranged to go on all the plow trucks, all the pickup trucks, the CDO car and the fire chief truck.
What about the fire trucks themselves?
Not the fire trucks, I didn't put that on, because they generally speed to and far
Okay.
if necessary.
And really the purpose of the tracking units is to make sure that the township is, for insurance reasons, to make sure it gives you the time that you're plowing, when the sand is on. Basically for insurance reasons, I think it's a really good investment, so.
For insurance purposes, does our insurance company recognize that and give us a preferable rate because of that?
I contacted them. I did contact them and see if we could get a discount on our insurance. Unfortunately, we can't, but it does appear very pleasing to them. Okay, they really like that, but no, there's no discount, unfortunately.
The reason I asked about the local fire trucks is just in case one has an accident, we know where it is and stuff like that. That's why I asked if the fire trucks would have it on us. But, I don't know, if it's something we should think about.
Like that, and I can have it recorded.
Through the mayor, generally, fire trucks don't go places by themselves and they're not unattended. In the dispatch knows where they are, whereas a plow truck is out for hours and hours and hours.
Okay.
And fire trucks are very much more regimented, and there is a significant cost for each piece of equipment. So it's not usually advantageous to do fire trucks because you already know where they are, and mileage is greatly reduced on a fire truck.
Okay.
So any more questions on the resolution? I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Yes.
Okay, and that's carried. On to item 4.2. Technology purchase. So the resolution says that council for the corporation of the township of Bruno, Lindau, and Raglan accept this report as submitted and authorizes the expenditure of up to $4,600 plus HT for the purchase of an Owl Pro for council chambers, a second voice recorder for recording closed session meetings, a second projector for use during council meetings for displaying all net meetings, and to replace an outdated computer for the chief building official using modernization funding. Do I have a mover on the resolution? Councilor.
I can move.
Councilor Feltham, do I have a seconder? Councilor Vance. Discussion, if any.
Well, we need it.
Okay.
Because that's not allowed, is that this?
No,
And then there's that.
It's more, yeah. So, okay, anything from the seconder? Me?
Nope.
No?
So just, sorry, I don't mean to
Sorry.
interrupt. So the Owl Pro, it's gonna be a little bigger than that?
So if I made to the mayor, because I purchased one. It's a little more enhanced. It's basically, for your observation, it's white, but the sound is much better in the picture. It's just an upgrade of that.
Any other questions from member of council? Councilor.
I'm wondering if we should possibly check out the acoustics in this room. I think because there's the taller ceilings in that. I know you see some rooms where you get, and I think there is a slight echo in here. And you can get those padded things that you put on the walls so that the sound isn't bouncing around and may give us a better quality sound for the people that's listening in. I don't know if there's anybody that does that kind of work to check out. I'm not sure.
So through the mayor, staff can look into that, and one thing that does help, that's inexpensive, is carpet
Yes,
on walls.
yes. Building.
So yeah, that's not a part of the resolution, so okay, so staff can bring that forward to a future meeting. Any other questions of council? If not, I'll call for a vote then, all in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, then that's carried. Now down to item 4.3, budget preparation. Once we have your working documents, so I believe this presentation is going to be handed over to you.
Members of council. This is probably going to be a bit of a joint presentation because we all have a bit of information to provide to council this evening. So in your package, the first thing I'd like to address is the fees and charges. If council recalls, we had a look at the different municipalities around and what they were charging for certain items. And Tammy has prepared a report that I'm going to ask Tammy to walk council through so that you understand what they are proposing.
So this is the one, this, oh, so the first one we have is the building department one, which our chief building official put together for us. We took our neighboring townships and townships that are similar in size and population size. So you can see the breakdown of what things cost in other places. If you look at the BLR township column, it tells you in the black what we charge right now. And in the red is what the recommended change would be.
You can tell me, you on the building permits?
Pardon me?
You on the building
I
permits?
am.
Yeah.
The third breakdown that has the photocopies, faxes, tax certificates, etc. Also has the same municipalities in comparison to. second last column has your average of those speeds, and then the recommended fee is in the final column. You will notice a slight increase in the fees. The recommendations are based on cost recovery.
If I could take the suggestions.
Like council now, we have municipalities are not to be like private companies making money. The idea is like fees ought to cover the cost of providing the service for that specific item. And in fact, building departments are supposed to be revenue neutral, meaning that the fees coming in should offset the cost of the staff time and the administration service.
What's this transfer of permit, what's that? It's on the permit fee. On the second page. From the very bottom.
I would suggest that it's likely when a building permit is in somebody's name and gets transferred to another name when the sale of the property happens.
Oh, okay.
So I guess the feedback that we're looking at from a budgeting perspective is if council is agreeable to increasing the rates to the recommended amounts.
Well, yes, I think they should be, because nothing's ever going down, that's for sure. And then costs are always going up. You know, you have to pay for the person's time and everything else.
Okay, I'll make a comment. The Commissioner of Documents. My suggestion would be that for taxpayers, it'd be free, but if they're a non-resident, we charge them $10 because they are coming in and taking up our staff's time and they don't contribute to our municipality. But if you pay taxes here, then it would be free service.
And what's this one, Bella?
The commissioning of documents.
Papers that. Which one's that?
It's on the one where photocopies and all.
Or at the very bottom?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, yes, I see it now, yeah.
So just so the council understands, it's a requirement that the clerk of the municipality is a commissioner.
Yeah.
And must commission documents, and there is a cost to it. The clerk has to review the document, ensure that it's being signed appropriately, that it's more than just, here, watch me sign it. You have to be guaranteed whatever you sign is correct.
And I'm looking at the swimming pool permit. And that isn't taken care of under our building permits, right? Would we not want to have an inspection of a swimming pool, like of a certain size? I'm not saying kiddie pools are little, but if it's a pool that you have to be sure that there's appropriate fencing and all of that.
Yes.
Some municipalities charge for it, some don't. It's a very sensitive subject, I think, to a lot of
Yes.
people.
It is.
If we do decide to do that, we have to have some means of policing it, to see if we're around checking everybody's backyards. There's gonna be a process to do that, should you choose.
I wonder if there could be some kind of stipulation that, say, a pool that's worth over a certain amount, monetary value, like, then you would know that it's gonna have proper fencing and that. I don't know how other municipalities.
So for the mayor, liability with a pool that has 10 gallons of water is equivalent to liability with a pool that's 10,000 gallons of water.
That's true. That's true.
Is it the same thing from this one to the one that's from the CDA? Or is the fees on your admin kind of fees for filling the doors? Because I know some municipalities, the fire truck provides water, so. You don't have an answer.
This is filling of the pools is fire department fundraising, right?
So then it probably should not be on this list and just be on this one. Understood. So the swimming pools are the only ones kind of a concern right now for council, because there may not be enough framework around it. Can we at least get an agreement that the rest of the rates are fine, so we can bring back, you know, decent charges out?
I think the question with the swimming pools would be, what is it covered under? Is it covered under the building code?
And I think again, work for council to see what that looks like, and that's why I suggest we take it back and have the CDO provide us with the framework of what is being covered for the cement money.
But other than the commissioning, I would like to see non-residents charge $10 and residents free, because they are paying taxes here, so it is a service that we should offer to them.
You're talking about the documents. so-
Yes, and the commissioning of documents, yes.
Some thoughts on that?
I don't have a problem with that.
I don't have a problem with you.
Your worship, you'll notice that there are some items on there that we haven't charged for in the past. They're suggesting that we charge for. One of them is entrance permits. Because it does take staff time to go and inspect prior to and after. Installation.
Yes.
Also researching permit archives, re-inspection of work. It's for a permit and construction starting without a permit.
Yes. Because they all take staff time.
Okay, so is council happy with those fee increases? It's comparable. That's definitely comparable to some municipalities. It falls somewhere in the middle, I would say. So we start with the staff and we get that back to the 15th, correct?
Recreation. this. Document, what I did not realize is that recreation is budgeted for separately because it happened on bank account. I'm concerned about this because it's money, it should be all in the municipal thing. It should be budgeted with all the rest of the municipal services. So the concern I have is I don't know the history to be able to say what we should be doing this. I think it should be, the money should be put into the municipal account. It should be, their bank account should be closed. I don't know if this is rec committee money or if this is municipal money. I don't know if Virginia has an independent answer, but
If I have never seen a recreation committee that was a committee of council run with a separate bank account in my history of municipalities. There is municipal recreation committees, i.e. Quadville, has their own bank account, but they're their own committee, but not a recreation committee.
that is actually what I'm trying to say. This is a service the municipality provides. It's a service that should be part of your routine budget. It's not, it shouldn't be a separate budget on its own.
Okay.
It's one thing if it's a totally separate organization that council donates money to help. And if they provide you accounting of what they've done with your money, this does not appear to be the case here.
If I may ask, Mayor, has Will said anything about this, the auditor in Virginia?
So for me, we have spoken about this and talking about how to implement it. It wouldn't be difficult to do. To roll into our computer system.
So it would just roll in as everything else does. It wouldn't have its own identity.
It would still be separated under the budget as recreation, but it would be all under.
It would show like a different department, like your roads and all of that in your chart of accounts.
And that's what I found confusing, because when I was going through the budget, there is a portion where there is recreation in your overall budget, but there's nothing, there was no revenue for hall rental, there was no cost for maintaining the building, it was kind of, and then part-time stuff. So this way, it's all in one budget, you're not having to go to two different budgets to get control. And my bigger concern is that if the money's under the care and control of the municipality, it should be under the care and control of the municipality of Oneida County. Because otherwise it's duplicating work, because then Virginia has to reconcile another bank account. The auditor has to go in and do an audit on that account. So it's costing the municipality more money to have it set up this way.
What is the audit fee for that statement, do you know? That's a fair chunk. That could be used for something else.
So where do we go?
So if I might, your worship, I think that we just look at the bank account, decide when it makes the most sense to close it. And speaking to Virginia about it, and there's no fees on this account. So we don't have to leave enough in there to make sure we can cover a fee. We can just completely take it out and transfer it into the other one and close the account. We'll have to look at the bank policy to see who will have to sign. It'll probably have to be a member of council and Virginia sign to be able to do that.
And if I'm not mistaken, we transfer money from our bank account, the township bank account, to that bank account, so we can write the checks on that account.
Yeah. Often, write checks as an operating.
So it really doesn't make sense.
And I have seen a number of communities where the recreation committee has their own budget, their own bank account, they're fundraising, and they're putting the money into that, and council gives them a donation like you have with the arrangement. This is not the case from what I can see, because the municipality is actually doing the budget as well, and that's why I think it's best if it's all under one, and it saves cost and audit and time for staff.
That makes sense.
So as you see, we have not entered in any numbers in the 2022 on this one. We want to roll it into the overall budget and we'll bring it back with numbers. Because that was kind of my concern when I was looking at the numbers and thinking, please, so budget here, where does this money come from? And where does it match on the other budget?
So
Yeah.
then when you set up the new recreation department, you'll still keep the subheadings like for the arena and for Bicentennial Park and for the beaches, and they'll all have their own
Possibly.
yeah.
Possibly. One of the things I've noticed about your budget is that there's a chart, an account in your chart of accounts for ad grant that you only get once. And this is cumbersome, and you would never do that in the, you have multiple grants, you would have a provincial and federal grant audit or chart accounts. Then you would put all of your money into there. I would say with recreation, you might have parks. I don't know that you would want to go into the detail of each independent park unless it's really important for us to have that level of detail. It's probably less time consuming for that one time when council wants to see how much something costs for this specific park to actually go through the GL and pull up the numbers. Then it would be to always itemize them. That is one of the things that you have in your overall budget right now is that wages are apportioned by who works in what department, and it's a bit of a misnomer because technically your administrative staff, their wages should be apportioned over all of the accounts too, because they're the ones providing, writing the checks, doing certain things that are taking care of a lot of it. So it's not really something we should. So if council's okay with that, I'd like to get that action right away, so then we can move it into the budget and have the new.
Suggestion?
Yes.
Do we need a resolution thing for that?
I would like to have our solution for that, if I don't mind. Revenue expenses. Yes, change yes to next, yes.
So. It's got something to like.
So include the citizens partners, state of their sectors.
Oh,
Okay. So that's not reserve fund. That's-
So that's the resolution. So that we, the council, operation of the township of Brunel and Dr. Ragland, direct staff to close the recreation bicentennial park bank accounts and incorporate the recreation bicentennial park revenue and expenses into the general budget. I need to move on that. Councilor? Councilor Nance, a seconder. Councilor?
Okay.
Councilor Buffalo? Any more discussion on the matter? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote and all in favor.
Yes.
Yes.
That's carried.
The next thing that I'm going to chat with, council about is the draft that we started with the overall budget. The format, all of this is the same format that you were using last year. The next time you see it, it's not going to look like that, but I wanted you to see what it, try to get compared. The concern I have is you've got your capital stuff buried into your line items as opposed to having a capital budget and operations budget. We spoke about that before and what separation is not. And that's why your budget's not gonna look the same when you see it. And the totals will end up being very close to the same, but you won't see, you should have an operating budget to capital. And when I'm speaking about capital items, these are things that are nice to have, but not necessary. Operating budget is the things that you absolutely must have, like paying your insurance and your hydro and certain wages and things that you need to be, use value operating. The capital stuff would be the roads and things like that. You might want to work on. There are some things that council needs to address this coming year. Same with any of the things in the fire department that would be purchases that are over and above the typical cost. That's going to look different, but I wanted you to see how they're populating. But I also wanted council to see where we're at with some of the expenditures. And you will note in the one line item that I don't know if it's highlighted on yours. The hydro costs. When I looked at putting in a value, the hydro fees were already what I was planning on budgeting for the entire year based on previous expenses, but I understand that there's a reason for them. And then there's some other anomalies that we have to go through. I don't know if I'm review members and so that we should be looking at.
Or you're saying there's no capital items in this budget that we have, this draft we have ahead of us.
I can't say for certain on the transportation. I can for sure.
I seen under fire there was.
The fire there's a line item under fire that is called small tools and something else, which is going to be
Yes.
changed. Most of those things are capital costs, they're not costs that are small tools. Small tools would be having to buy new axe. And that is one of the difficulties with the chart of accounts, and hopefully in the next little while we get it cleaned up so that when you get your variance report, you're gonna see compared to your budget where you're at, and you don't have to look at all of these accounts that are on the IFO, one-off accounts, and these grant ones that are sitting there that you're never gonna get again.
Can I ask what happened with the truck? Did that ever get tendered, and if it did we get quotes on it, or where did that end up?
I believe,
So through the mayor, this, you refer to the,
Oh, yes,
so the plow truck was tendered,
yes,
and we only received one bid on it,
yes.
and that was awarded by.
Okay,
So the delivery of the truck should be.
okay, so we have to make allowance for that in our this year's budget.
Correct.
so is there anything you're looking from council tonight?
I just wanted to explain to council that it's not gonna look like this, and I'm not giving you years of backup.
Okay.
You know how council likes to usually compare a couple of years prior to see where you're going? I can't do that without having to go through your GL and pull out what might be capital expenses. So my preference is to say, we're close. You're gonna see something different, and numbers at the end should largely jive. We'll try to put it into both places for you so you can see that it's the same. It'll just be put it into the format.
I think that's kind of standard in a lot of municipalities, they have the operating budget. They're two separate.
And the thing with the operating budget, it's largely the same year after year after year. There might be increases because cost of living's gone up, hydro rates have gone up, insurance increases, certain costs, you know, what, we don't have a choice in can't control costs. So with your capital, you can determine which projects you're going to do or not do in the year, and they're the ones that you typically decide to cut, unless you decide to cut a level of service. Suggest that's pretty hard to cut levels of service when your main service is roads.
So will. Meeting. Capital costs provided to council.
Yes, I would like to have I know that we would ask council to provide into the subdivision projects that we worked on were outstanding.
Okay.
So that we can pull numbers together. And then we'll have that with the operational, with what council has agreed to as a potential revenue increase.
Questions from council on this at this point in time? Here's what?
The other thing that council is going to see in the next one is that wages and benefits are going to be their own line item.
Okay.
And then all the wages for all of the employees will be in one, not broken down by department. They're too small, and employee wages are confidential information. And it's difficult when you only have one employee in the department. This way it protects the confidentiality of that information.
That's what you're saying. Well, it would be interesting to see. For sure, and something that council's not used to, we're used to this format. For some reasons, that information has to change, of course.
I'm gonna try and make this consistent as possible.
Sure.
It's just the pieces where I think in your transportation, you've got under winter maintenance or under summer maintenance, you've got projects in there, and the gravel costs are really high. That's not your operating cost for gravel. That is because you decide to do a road project. And that's what makes your operating expenses look really high when we to really get down to the cost of doing business.
So in order to get the operational, we would have received Jordan's budget and Jordan's.
Jordan's and savings. Most of the operating stuff is pretty easy to budget from year to year, like I said, because you really kind of look at the pattern of what's been spent in previous years and you say, okay, well, cost really hasn't gone up that much. And I noticed that in some of the line items, you budget a fairly high amount and you're only spending a small portion of it, so I reduce those down to what I think is realistic. It's not a great idea. There are places where I would tell you to leave a big buffer because of an unknown, but for the most part, a lot of them are quite high. And I find that often is just because this is what you've always done, and continue to do it without really thinking about it.
Council on the process?
I've got one on the culverts, like the roads, 50,000 budget. We've got years of culverts down there. Yeah.
So through the mayor, that's a good observation, and I'm sure that we can adjust that.
And I'm just wondering about the sweeper also, it's 50,000, I know it's pretty high to get the sweeping. Sweeping done over there. No, sorry, I'm on the wrong line. No.
That's a
no.
typo. That should be 5,000.
Oh, 5,000, oh.
That's just a
I was
typo.
gonna say we should buy, our own sweeper.
Rather say, I think that would be what we've been considering if that was the case. Yes. That'd be your capital budget. And we've seen some of the things in the transportation department. I wasn't sure what they were, why they were there. Culvert, if that's culvert maintenance, and you're rotating, you're changing certain number of culverts every year, you have culvert strategy, then that would be, again, part of the capital plan as opposed to part of your operational plan.
I don't think that's a plus this year. You know, our 2011 John Deere loader paid for 2017 international paid for. So we got 40.
Well, that's one of the other things I'm not sure. Council has a practice of putting money into reserves. Some municipalities has a reserve policy that requires a certain amount of put into reserves every year to ensure that you have your assets for the future.
Yeah, typically, we never had a reserve policy that I'm aware of.
But we did have the reserves.
We do have reserves, and I know at the end of the year, any surplus automatically went to reserves.
I know last year we discussed the cemeteries and I guess we never ever got out to Sherman's Road to check that one out there.
Yes.
Have we got a student grant this year? Why? Okay.
For swimming. Yeah.
So, any questions?
There's something else I need, I know I can't find it right at the moment, but $6,000, I think it was for a permit for agriculture.
On page 2 there. Almost at the bottom.
Aggregate license fee.
Yeah, that's an annual fee?
It's a revenue. And so I'm not clear because there are two charter count, things in the charter council about aggregates. And one is a licensing fee, and I'm not sure that the municipality even is allowed to license pits. And the other one is the money that you would get under the Aggregate Resources Act for the hauling. So I'm not clear on if it's a redundant.
Do we pay to license?
What page are you on?
Two.
Page 2.
Where, Sam?
We get something from the province, don't we, for aggregate? It's a chunk we get.
So you get a royalty.
Yes,
Yes. It's under the Aggregate Resources Act.
yes, and that's your revenue.
That's right. The line item says aggregate license fees under Ontario specific grants. So
Yes.
It's not a license fee, it's mislabeled. And if you go down further. Aggregate royalties under
What page is
fee
that on?
services and
Three.
charges.
That could be in the wrong.
And this is what I'm thinking, so I'm thinking that it's not a grant from the province, it's a royalty that we get paid because of the amount of material that's hauled out of the pit.
And I believe there's a file on that somewhere.
I would like to remove one from the chart of accounts and only have one account, so we know what we're doing.
Just make sure it gets in the right one.
Yeah.
So while we're on page 2, the seniors community grant program, and seniors something. Back then it was us. So is that funded by CRC?
Mayor, yes, portion of that is funded by the CRC, but portion of we
Yes.
and the council's wishing to continue that this year, but the CRC has inquired. If we are going to be, and we'd like to know so they can plan their budget.
I personally think we should. We have fairly big crowd there yesterday, and you have taken.
100 people that
And so, I mean, everybody's coming back out again. And it's for the seniors, so I'm on board with that. I think that's best.
Yes, because there's a lot of people look forward to it. It's a social event for them. They get out, they see their friends, they see their neighbors, and it's good for them, and I think we should. We fund beaches and other things for the younger, well, the older people can use it too. But I think we should do that for our seniors.
So if I may, so on page 2, the seniors community grant program, that $4,000 was actually the collective teacher grant that we got through.
Yes.
What you guys are speaking of for the seniors lunch club is on page 13,
Yes.
Parks and Recreational Services.
Yes.
So we just have to add a budget amount for that to council positions.
Yes. Because it's not a grant, it's an expenditure.
The monies that they collect, the monies that they collect at those dinners, does it come back, like, if they collect from here, does it come back to for more dinners, or where's that money going?
That's collected by CRC and managed by CRC. And I was also going to suggest that if we are going to fund this program, that we write the CRC a check for a total amount this year and we don't have to look after. There's a lot of confusion with caterer on who's funding the dinner, who gets the invoice back and forth. One time we fund one time CRC funds one. I think it's better managed and the leader of the seniors group can keep track of the financials together and know what we have left and plan for dinners around that. So I think for management of funds, if we're looking to fund this program this year, write them a check and it's 30.
So through the mayor, how would we know how much to give then, or do we just say our contribution is $4,000 and then?
That's, I think, typically how we've done it in the past, whatever council is comfortable with putting towards that program.
I think last year was 4, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
4,034.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, instead of invoicing every time we have a meeting, it's the office and then the other. Since there's the back, it's his office, staff.
If I might, your worship, I think that that's an excellent idea. I would also add that there would be a report back required. This is public money that you're granting. And anytime you do so, the agreement that goes out would say that, yes, we'll give you the money, however, we expect you to come to council and provide us with an annual report on your money. Whatever the stats.
Yeah. I agree.
And, I just want to point out the CRC, it's not just the dinners they're doing. Twice throughout the winter, they had a basket program. So they had come to the store and had a list of 3-4 seniors in between. And they were delivered a very nice basket. And that happened twice. Yeah, it's really nice.
And I think once last year, was it before March break or sometime, they had brought craft kits that grandparents or parents could get and take them to do with their children or grandchildren, which was kind of cute. So they do different things in the
Yeah,
communities.
just not the lunches.
Yeah, Mayor, this Ontario Cannabis Legalization and Implementation Fund, what's that all about? And then on page 13, you got a cannabis study for the 12,000. What's that all about?
That was
Which was the first thing?
Page
Page
two.
2, the first one, the Ontario Cannabis Legalization and Implementation Fund. What's that all about?
That's a grant that this probably would have received.
Would have received, so we didn't
That's
get
not
it.
expense, that's a grant. And it would, I don't believe it's multi-year funding. I think it was a one-time funding, which is why I have a hard time with this, because it makes it look like you got money one year, we're not getting it another year.
Well, yeah, because in 2021, it says we got $5,620.
I believe that money went towards the study, did it not?
Well, in the study, it's $12,000 in 21.
I mean, this I would like to have had to put in a portion of the money from the study.
Well,
Virginia might know best.
my question is, why did we study it?
I wouldn't say for sure. We may have allocated funds on the study. Now we're talking about the county study.
Yes.
So the county study was paid out of cannabis dollars that the county received, so there was no cost of this.
The money that we received actually meant for community safety.
Because we passed a bylaw, did you not, that cannabis was not to be sold in the county?
It's correct. It's not.
Yeah. So I was just wondering what this cannabis stuff was all
So
about.
the study revolves around. Just because we can't sell it doesn't mean that we're all not set up. for this.
Okay.
That's what the study's involved.
Oh, okay,
And recommendations coming from.
okay. I was just wondering.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Now, what's this ICIP? Right underneath that, what's that all? It was for $746,360. Page 2,
Infrastructure money.
pardon me?
That would be infrastructure money
Oh, okay,
within a grant from the province.
In 2020.
yeah,
And that's why I say, when you have all these grants itemized, it doesn't really make a lot of sense because you're not getting that money anymore. And when I would do a budget, I would have total provincial grants, total federal grants. So we have a breakdown on another sheet that says, here's the grants for this year, but if you've been successful in getting.
So below that, the community garden, so it has a 4,358. What they have in mind?
That's what's left over from.
Okay, so it's not 2021 funds, it's leftover funds from.
So just put into reserves in the other.
So did anything like,
that was my next question. Did anything come of it? Does anybody use it? Who's in charge of this?
Oh, through the mayor, we didn't have a garden committee. As far as I can see, fell apart. So it's sitting duck right now.
Is this the one?
The council wants to go with it this year. There was some food grown last year, but it ended up going to waste. And then we put that.
Because if I remember, they put a fencing on that and it cost a pretty penny, did it not?
It was part of the.
That's correct. So you did receive money for that and that's put up and there are raised beds there. There's a shed that's supposed to go up. It's sitting here. It's in limbo.
So basically, the way I look at it, the municipality has kind of inherited their. They allow a lease for X amount of years, they just forget when it's. To me, it's kind of like. Some student funding.
I have been contacted by the public school who are very interested in putting a student program in there this spring. As well as CRC senior program, they are looking to take part as well. So between the two organizations, we might be able to. But there's still gonna be municipal involvement there.
I guess at this point in time, at least we have some knowledge left. To help. Make it so.
yeah, it would be nice to see it go ahead.
I think it'd be a great project for kids to learn how to grow their food.
Yeah, actually, the school has already started. They're going with
That's.
that.
Okay. So that includes-
Just another topic on that, there is a danger tree there that's leaning, the beaver has chewed it off, and there was some communication back and forth between the mayor and staff. I'll say that tomorrow the tree's gonna be taken care of. If all goes just fine.
Wait, now the person that owns the property, are they okay with that?
We leased it, so it's ours.
So is that, okay.
Any other questions or questions?
So, so it's, I know we're saying a regular council meeting, but the legal fees here.
What page are you on there?
Okay,
It's not much discussion.
I'll wait till. the
Oh,
next
okay.
meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, on page 4 there, you got modernization fund expense. $297,000 some dollars, and actual is only 21,000. That's a big comparison there.
What page are you on, Mr. Banks?
Page 4. What's that all about?
The municipal modernization fund is money municipality received to modernize. So that was the actual that was spent in 2020. The actual 297,000, it's still left.
So we still have money in that.
Yes. Yeah. So remember tonight, we, at the very first of the meeting, we passed a couple resolutions.
Mhm.
And it's basically modernization of the technology.
Okay, so that'll come on that.
That's.
We initially received 353,000, 334 in 2019.
And actually, we've asked staff to come forward with a plan how to spend the dollars, so I'm not sure when staff. will get that. So, soon in the future.
To present some stuff that, you need, I don't see anywhere, like the signage, electronic sign.
So that would be,
Other than modernization, I think John had mentioned those signs.
Yes.
Again, most of the modernization money would be considered capital expense, which is why we refer to your operation budget. That's going to be a little bit difficult for council to work with it, and you'll understand.
so I guess right now, if there's anything else, council, that we want to staff, then this what we received.
I would suggest, Your Worship, that if there is any red flag items, I know council's going to want to have some time to go over these. Before we bring back the next version, I would like to know if there's any kind of hot ticket things that we need to pay attention to.
Council decided on any projects they want to see done this year or coming in here?
No, sorry, council has given us an idea of what didn't get done last year,
Okay,
that needs to be rolled over into this year. And we were going to pull that information all together and put that into a capital budget so we can see where we're at. And if there is room for more projects, then that's one thing. But we need to get the modernization money needs to be spent because you cannot get any more until you get this
exactly.
bond.
But wasn't there some extra money for roads, we were looking at Cedar Grove and, Elks Lake?
Well, we received extra money as far as our whole CIF, I believe, this year, so we'll increase in money. So to me, it's very possible that yes, there will be money to do those roads. I know council did. We did pass a resolution in regards to the official resolution. I know council verbally agreed to for staff. Look at least August and Lake and the rest of the neighborhoods. So. Or, and I guess if there's anything else that they thought should be included in this year's budget, I guess you can forward that to staff for consideration.
I know we had mentioned that at our last budget meeting.
Yes.
People will know.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I know the CIF, I didn't have a copy of our reserves and what we have within that OCIF. Substantial funds. I always believe that OCIF is money given to municipalities, whole roads. That's truly what I believe it should be used for. What I believe is in that account. This one time. I think it's substantial enough that, you know, these projects such as August and Lake or Little Cedar Grove. It's like I said, I know in the past we've incorporated municipal staff, roads crew to do some of the work if we had to. That not be able to say. It's not, I know we use our own staff, but maybe there's parts of that project we can use to tender as part of it, whether it's the application of the gravel. Hiring back in the ditch to put in culverts or whatever. it may be, But. I truly believe there's money there we can use to improve some of those. Yes, Councilman.
Is it possible to get a copy of what our reserve balances was at the end of last year?
That will come in the overall budget
Okay.
document. when we get it.
Yeah, I mean, we gotta get to the step here where we put numbers in and our staff can bring a recommendation that, brought some of those from this budget, but there's something for roads or whatever, I mean. That's what- So, I'm sure all of that information should come down to. So, I don't know if you want to discuss a date for a meeting at this time, or leave it up to you whenever you have time.
I think we'll leave it there some more worship and see how much we can put together and I'm hoping for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I would
So
definitely.
we'll just have the budget passed by the end of April, because first meeting in May. Next year, earlier. I really like the budget process where you start working on your budget in August, September, staff start to develop their projects and their plans. And then council sees the draft of the budget no later than the meeting in October. We start to deliberate, and then by early January, February, you can shove your budget past when it's due in your surplus. And you can always bring it back and modify it before you, body that passes the operational budget fund. Before the end of the year. So staff have the ability to spend money going into the new year, and then they bring their capital budget early in January, February. And if they need to, when spending some big grants or if the costs are changing, they come back to the modified budget just.
She said, what's happening with Schroeder Road?
That's some of the project that will have to be completed. What's that?
That you might recognize, Schroeder Road, that's from the division that needs to be finished.
Sorry, the new side.
So did we order our slide in sand?
So through the mayor, I'm not able to get an update from.
Everything on my paper has been missed.
Any other questions for us?
Just one thing.
Yeah.
Council, consider that different there. Because I know it's a private. and all that. We also know that the things are being increased. and things like that. I don't know how long they had that. They had that before I was on council.
So.
Is that
Well, it is a budget discussion, so it's appropriate to decide on this tonight. Is there an amount you would like to propose?
No.
Sam?
Right now, we are in contract with them. So if we do decide to do any changes, we would have to revisit that.
I think it would be fair to give them some extra because of the public washrooms. Because when they were getting $3,000, there was no public washrooms there, and they do maintain them and clean them. And they are used, they're really used.
But I think too, part of that contract at the time was, they got that money for those washrooms.
Yes.
For that purpose of servicing the public with washing.
Yes.
For the duration of time.
If I may, your worship, Tammy and I have had a conversation about this, and she has done some, so it goes beyond just the contract, and she should provide some information.
So in regards to yours.
Pardon? In regards to
Comments that the doors aren't always unlocked. Saying that they're just asking them to make sure they stay unlocked.
It's not just elaborate on the agreement a bit more as well, that they're obligated to do certain things with.
So maintaining the washrooms, cleaning and stocking them, providing all necessities.
There was some term.
So from there, it's 9 years.
9 years, okay. How many years is it been?
I think it's 2020 or that.
I would like, personally, I would like. Personally, I like to staff that. Research, I think. So anything else? then? Council? See, for product from next week.
It's supposed to finish the next one. Okay, that's my goal.
So, enough, but that close to finishing, then we're having that discussion.
One question, what's this piece of paper?
That's the next thing I wanted to talk about.
Because the way I read it, we have our township down here, but we have, like, as far as I can see, no other township from the Renfrew County. It looks like they're all over the place, like Desiderato and Frontenac, like.
So you may, Councilor Banks, so I guess I'll maybe start on this, maybe she'll leave the information.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just saying.
That is correct. So I went and looked for municipalities that had similar size, similar geography, similar populations, households, we looked for very different variables
Mhm.
to measure how council is operating or how municipalities operate compared to others. And as you can see here, if you look at where your municipality is, there's not very many that have the same median household income as you do. So it's hard to find them to be able to compare apples to apples. Doesn't matter where they're located in the province. So I picked a variety of them. There were of course way more, but I picked some that are smaller, so you can see that your operating expenses are less than some of these smaller communities. We looked at village your tax rate. I wanted you to notice here that your tax rate's not unreasonable. You know, councils are always concerned about the tax rate and what they're charging. The tax rate is completely driven by your assessment and by your levy, your requirement to fund your operation. And again, it's difficult to have an apples to apples, but one of the things that I looked at here that I found really interesting is that almost 80% of the municipalities were higher in the income than your community. So that is a fact. I went to a municipality where council was trying to budget and was very concerned about pinching pennies because they didn't want to have to increase their levy when it is election year. But then, in order for them to provide the service that they needed, they had to hire 3 more people. And they didn't want to do that. And so I showed them the numbers, and they realized they were underspending in their human resources, and it made a big difference for their ability to rationalize why they needed to bring in the extra people. Bunch of other reasons, but the idea being, looking at numbers like this can help you understand how you're performing in comparison to other municipalities. One of the things I think council may wish to focus on is developing land for housing or encouraging development here so that you can actually increase your assessment and spread the cost over more and more properties. So this is just information.
No, I just wanted to look at that.
No, it's an interesting.
Mhm.
If I had more time, I would have done it by department.
Yeah.
Like, I would have taken roads and.
Yeah, but this is
narrowed it
good
down.
though, wait, it's not.
It's really sticks out to me is BLR taxable assessment of 240 million. And it's like Ireland. Taxable assessment of.
Yeah, that's what I see, 1 billion.
It's up, they're on Lake Huron. So they have-
Oh, okay.
Like this is growing into scope as,
Okay.
and this is also a concern I think council needs to be aware of. Because MPAC didn't do the reassessment
Yeah.
with the blips that were going on and the high costs of housing over time during COVID, they wanted to make sure that it stabilizes before they go into a reassessment, so you're not ending up with that crazy increase for some of your ratepayers. One of the things I've done for council before was I showed the difference. If this was your property, here's the change in the assessment, here's the effect of the levy on your property. And you cannot predict, you know, it's not like a bell curve where you can say, okay, this many properties are going to go up, this many are going to go down. You cannot. It's like an ECG on steroids, and it was like this. And so Andrew and I could have a house side by side. His could be worth 50,000 and mine worth 45, and my taxes go up and his go down. It's purely the way that it's the relationship, and it's an interesting calculation to do. I just could not imagine how it would look like this, but it did. And it's one of the things I highly encourage council to talk about, that if you're looking at an increase, you're talking about a levy increase. So your levy is going to go up. If someone's taxes may not go up, you cannot predict that. So your tax rate can also change. But changing your tax rate still may not make my taxes go up, because you may have had a property that was reassessed from a $50,000 property to a $500,000 property. And then they're going to take more of the tax burden from the rest. So this is the thing, if you look at, it's a piece of pie assessment. And if you got a sliver and someone else has got a bigger sliver, they're taking more of that whole assessment. And all of these little bits, it's difficult to really help councils visualize what it could look like. That's why I thought at least showing you some numbers shows that you guys are doing reasonably well. the size of the municipality, you have a healthy reserve fund. Last time, I was sort of flabbergasted about how much you actually do have in reserves.
Yeah.
And suggested the possibility of borrowing from your reserve fund for some of the purchases that you're doing, so you're not paying interest on interest.
Yeah.
You can add interest back to your own bank account, so it's your money working for you.
Yeah, I can remember back from first year we were out on such. That time we thought it wasn't too bad, we actually start learning. Where we are then now, it's.
And that goes to excellent management on behalf of staff and council. Budgeting and really being fiscally responsible. I think it's important. The other thing is, if you ever ask an auditor about how much you should have in reserve funds, they say you never have enough.
Yeah.
You need to be able to replace your assets. You need to be responsible in ensuring that you have the ability to meet the future needs.
And that's why current asset management is so important. So, as we know, there's a future. It's all, so it's right, it's not just your roads and culverts, it's equipment. So that is the open part of the meeting right now. We have a resolution. It says that council will go into closed session pursuant to the municipal act 2001, section 2392 for the purposes of subsection B. Personal matters of an identifiable individual, including municipal or board employees. Subsection D, labor relations, employee negotiations. Subsection E, litigation or potential litigation. Including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. And subsection F, advice on the subject to solicitor client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Do I have a mover on that? Dr. Rutledge, all in favor? Yes. And carried. Okay, so the resolution says that the council for the corporation of the township of Brudenell, Lindau, and Red, closed session at 9:51 p.m. Any move on that? Councilor Young, seconder. Councilor Banks, all in favor?
Yes.
Okay, that's carried. Councilor bylaw. Council for the Corporation Township of Brudenell, Lindau, and Red, hereby adopts bylaw 2022-16 being bylaw from proceedings of the March 20th, 2022. March 30th, thank you, 2022, special meeting, Council Lady Mover on that, Councilor. Councilor Elfeld, seconder, Councilor Rutledge, all in favor? Yes. That's carried. To motion to adjourn, this meeting is adjourned at 9:54 p.m. Do I have a mover, Councilor Young? That's all we need is a mover, so. Adjourn. Meeting is adjourned.